I'm educational justice coach Lindsay Lyons, and here on the Time for Teachership podcast, we learn how to inspire educational innovation for racial and gender justice, design curricula grounded in student voice, and build capacity for shared leadership. I'm a former teacher leader turned instructional coach. I'm striving to live a life full of learning, running, baking, traveling, and parenting because we can be rockstar educators and be full human beings. If you're a principal, assistant superintendent, curriculum director, instructional coach, or teacher who enjoys nerding out about co-created curriculum with students, I made this show for you. Here we go. Welcome to season 5. A little late. We actually started a month ago, but welcome to season 5 of Time for Teachership. I am so excited for episode 184. And although we're a bit late on the season premiere episode, as we've already premiered, we're back to school. We're in already a month, at least in the Northeast, but more in different parts of the country. And I just really want to name, in this 5th season of the podcast, half a decade of episodes. Here we go. I'm so excited. I want to share some of the updates for this particular season. Better late than never. So midway through last season, I started experimenting with monthly mini series. And each mini series is related to key topic areas that I coach on. And honestly, I just personally love learning about and have lots of thoughts that I want to share and lots of things that I want to learn from guests on the show. So you might have noticed that. That's been going on. I've tried to align the publication of these episodes with the time frame educators have typically expressed interest in discussing these areas. So of course, at different time points throughout the year, you're thinking about different things and different topics feel salient in different parts of the year, more so than others. Now, I know that's not a perfect science, and different folks are in different parts of their school year, and different topics resonate with different people kind of across the board. So I'd actually love some feedback if you have topics for mini-series that I should add or suggestions for shifting when those topics appear on the podcast. With that, let's explore the lineup and the hopes and dreams for this particular season, for the remainder of this particular season. Here we go. Updated topical mini-series will include one on systems transformation. Now, in this series, we'll learn about developing professional learning structures, developing equitable systems of competency-based assessment as one potential structure to build out, and advancing racial justice with an intersectional lens. So thinking about all three of these are kind of all niche topics that kind of intersect around, as always, equity, and thinking about the system-wide transformation of maybe an entire school or an entire district, an overhaul of and co-creation of an entire policy in a particular area, right? So there's a lot going on here, including a lot of adaptive leadership around justice, around change and leading change, right? There's a lot of moving pieces in this part. And so really excited to kind of keep bringing in specific topics within the umbrella of how to lead change and transform systems. In the last month, you heard our mini-series on systems transformation, or you read the blog post on systems transformation. So you've gotten some insight too into kind of how broad and almost cerebral and like theoretical and also kind of the intimate ways of being with one another, being in one another's community, and how to engage with folks. So it's kind of big and it's kind of narrow and it's kind of atopical and it could be topical. So there's a wide range here that I'm really excited to explore with folks. The second mini series topic is curriculum design. And so we've had this one from the get-go. In this series, we'll really learn about situating curricular thinking and planning within justice-based frameworks. So there is some theory, but it's also like, how do we do this thing, right? How do we make it really hyper-practical? How do we co-create units using a step-by-step process, for example? And thinking about how we explore those curriculum design possibilities, I'd love to, as educators are willing to share kind of success stories of what folks have created in terms of units that they have implemented in their class and want to share with others, and or thinking about like a development on the show, as we've done before in our unit dreaming series, of ideas that we kind of co-construct and we can witness the process in the podcast episode of that creation. Also in this section, really excited about
kind of leaders' stories of facilitating teacher co-developed curricula. So if you are a school or district leader or a department chair, thinking about how do we approach fueling, fostering, dreaming up this beautiful curriculum when you're leading a team or when you're leading folks who may create the same curriculum that you end up with and everyone ends up teaching the same thing, or you're leading a staff or a team that is going to actually develop a bunch of different curricula, and what are kind of the key components or process steps of developing that. So excited to hear both from educators and leaders in this space. Mini-series topic number 3, leadership. There are so many theories of leadership and so many aspects of leadership that I think honestly all of these pieces tie to leadership. But this mini-series specifically is thinking about shared leadership approaches. So in schools, sometimes we call this distributive leadership. I think shared is nice because it typically encompasses students and communities more than our distributive, which is typically teachers. So all of the things, right, all of the stakeholders involved in shared leadership and that kind of co-creation of change as opposed to top-down change that we ask everyone to, quote, buy into. And so kind of mindset shifts around this, practical pieces around this, theory around this, as well as adaptive leadership. And again, these pieces really touch all of the other topics, but adaptive leadership, really thinking about how we apply that theory of adaptive leadership and leading change and leading long-standing change where there's no clear solution. And we actually need shared leadership approaches to co-develop the solution. So these really go hand in hand, which is why they're categorized together in this mini episode. So when we're leading justice-oriented change in our educational communities, how do we kind of take the theory into practice in the effort of leading change in any aspect, right? We talked about leading change in the systems transformation, which is really transforming maybe one particular area. And leadership, it's kind of like, how do I build these skills globally, build these structures globally in my educational community so I'm ready for anything? So I've kind of built the system so that it is nimble and agile and whatever the word, it's adaptive, I suppose, right? And we are ready for anything that comes our way because the system is already in place. I see that kind of as like a preemptive. We don't know exactly what we're focused on yet. We're focused on building the structure. So we're ready. All right. Number 4, this mini series is a culture of discussion. And I think about this one as really the foundational layer of a lot of things that you would do either in your class or your staff community. So in this series, we're learning about creating a positive and not toxic positivity positive, but truly positive, values-driven, and appropriately challenging culture. This could, again, relate to class culture, which is typically how I conceive of it from my teacher brain first, but also, of course, relevant to that staff level culture, or even, again, if you're a department lead or chair, your team level culture. So creating that values aligned, appropriately challenging, right? Everyone's kind of in their zone of proximal development environments where tasks are building my skills, really feeling like I'm in that flow from Csikszentmihalyi's theory. I'm in that flow state. We've talked on the podcast before with Angela Watson about this idea of flow state. That was a great episode. Check it out. We want everyone to be there, staff and students alike. So that requires that positive foundation of values alignment and that all the tasks are appropriately challenging, not too much, but also not overly scaffolded, because then they're going to be easy and boring and we're just going to tune out, right? So what this does ultimately is when we lay this foundation of belonging and values and appropriate challenge, we are laying the foundation for things like generative discussions, which could include discussions of hard things that are often kind of high emotion topics, I've been calling them. Things like political conversations, particularly in the midst of an election year, or presidential election year, which only happens every 4 years, right? So this is big, this is in the news, this is kind of in everyone's conversation. Kids are going to pick up on this. Staff are certainly going to be aware of this. So we want to be able to invite conversation. One of the things that I was recently talking to a social studies group about is, I've heard folks talk before about the distinction between politics or political classrooms and partisan classrooms. So someone shared that, we shouldn't be talking politics in class. And I said, well, actually, especially in social studies, we can be a political classroom. Part of our standards are to talk about politics and political structure and have political discourse and be civically engaged. Like this is part of our standards, particularly in Massachusetts, very embedded in those standards now. And that's certainly one of the things in the framework. Partisan, I believe, is what this teacher was talking about, where we're not telling students what to think. We're not saying you need to vote for this candidate because da 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 da, right? And so I think we often avoid, right, thinking about adaptive and justice-based things, right? We often avoid conversations that may bring up high emotions, or we're not so sure, or we're uncomfortable. What we really want to do is create foundations for generative discussions where our hearts and our heads are kind of full, right? Our minds are like appropriately challenged. We're using evidence-based conversation. We are fueling change, opening up possibilities for justice. And we're not kind of entrenched in our positions. We are open to understanding and seeking to understand one another, right? And we are creating and deepening those relations in our community, whether it's staff to staff, staff to student, or student to student. So again, this culture of discussion mini-series is all about laying that foundation that's going to enable us to get to those generative discussions of things like politics, current events, figuring out how we live together with one another in this shared community, all while navigating things that come up like high emotions, like that kind of fear of saying the wrong thing, like the fear of being harmed, like the navigating high emotions, all the pieces, right? So we want to make sure that foundation is in place before we go there, and we do want to be able to go there. So this mini series is really taking you on the journey. Sometimes we'll start with the foundation pieces, belonging, values-driven stuff, and then sometimes we'll talk about appropriate challenge and appropriate scaffolds and not hyper scaffolding. And sometimes we'll get to that kind of top tier where we ultimately want to go, which is like, what are those discussions looking like? What are the protocols for them? How do we literally engage, and how do we support that engagement? How do we structure it so that it is something that we value and deepens our community and our capacity, and not restricts it or harms it? Okay, and now our fifth one, this is a new one this year. This is our fifth mini series topic. I love social studies curriculum. I'm always talking about social studies curriculum, but I also always want to speak expansively or share expansively about various topics, kind of the how to create curriculum regardless of the grade or subject you teach. And I also really love social studies. So we have in Massachusetts, the Department of Education, called DESE here, has partnered with organizations to create a Massachusetts aligned curriculum for social studies in elementary and middle school. And that continues to be built out. And I am very grateful to be part of the coaching work to prepare teachers to implement this and work with teachers to figure out like what this looks like and feels like and is implemented like with the students in the classroom. So really grateful to all the brilliant folks I get to work with on this project. And this curriculum is called Investigating History. So let's talk about what this might look like. In this series, we'll dig into the Massachusetts created open source, so anyone can access it, social studies curriculum. It currently spans grades 5 through 7 for the public. It is being piloted in grades 3 through 4. And we'll explore things that are relevant beyond folks in Massachusetts and beyond folks who are using this specific curriculum, because again, I want it to be relevant for anyone who is listening. And so even if you don't teach social studies, I do feel like, again, the pedagogy behind it is really important. So I'm hoping in this series to partner up and have guests on the show who have implemented the curriculum with students. So these would be the teachers who are piloting and for grade 3 and 4 piloting and teaching the full curriculum for grades 5 through 7, maybe some students if we're excited to get those students on. And talk about what it's like to experience this curriculum. We could talk with folks from the state, from Massachusetts, from DESE, and think about what they are thinking and observing. We could bring on folks from Tufts, that they have a really cool research project over there around democracy in classrooms, and they're doing a huge research study on this curriculum and its impact on students. I think that would be so fun to explore. We could also bring on curriculum writers. I mean, my hopes are high, so very excited. But again, I think relevant for social studies and wherever you teach, with whatever curriculum you teach. And again, just back to the pedagogy roots, what I'm really excited to do, because this is an inquiry-based curriculum, we can explore the inquiry routines, of which there are 3. and core principles, or what they call key instructional principles, of which there are 4 that really form the foundation of the curriculum and are good for any curriculum. And I hope to talk to all of those folks, and we'll keep you posted on that, but look for that in probably the spring. So that is the preview for season 5 for the remainder of the year. Get excited. I am going to link, in terms of freebies for this episode, I'm going to link all the things that might be relevant to you related to each of, particularly the first 4 miniseries I discussed. So in the blog post for this episode, which you can get at lindsaybethlyons.com/blog/184, I'm going to give you a personalized professional learning experience based on whichever topic you are most interested in learning about. So I'll be sharing 4 playlists with you for free on that blog post. Those include my systems transformation playlist, curriculum playlist, leadership playlist, and culture of challenge and discussion playlist. So again, grab those at lindsaybethlyons.com/blog/184. And I'm looking forward to connecting with you in the next episode.
If you like this episode, I bet you'll be just as jazzed as I am about my coaching program for increasing student-led discussions in your school. Shane Safir and Jamila Dugan talk about a pedagogy of student voice in their book, Street Data. They say students should be talking for 75% of class time. Do students in your school talk for 75% of each class period? I would love for you to walk into any classroom in your community and see this in action. If you're smiling to yourself as you listen right now, grab 20 minutes on my calendar to brainstorm how I can help you make this big dream a reality. I'll help you build a comprehensive plan, from full-day trainings and discussion protocols like Circle and Socratic Seminar to follow-up classroom visits where I can plan, witness, and debrief discussion-based lessons with your teachers. Sign up for a nerdy, no-strings-attached brainstorm call at lindsaybethlyons.com/contact. Until next time, leaders, think big, act brave, and be your best self.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at teachbetter.com/podcasts, and we'll see you at the next episode.